"Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins." The road to Veldorn wound like a gray serpent through the wet lowlands of Temeria. Rain fell in a steady drizzle, soft yet relentless, and the scent of peat and pine hung thick in the air. Geralt of Rivia, his cloak heavy with damp, guided Roach through the mud-slick path with practiced ease. The Witcher's cat-like eyes reflected the dull light of the overcast sky, scanning the landscape that stretched before him. Reeds, black water, and a horizon blurred by mist. He had ridden 2 days without rest, following the thread of a contract whispered from tavern to tavern. Something killed in the swamps near Veldorn. A beast, they said, or a spirit. Perhaps both. Men were found with their throats torn open and their blood gone, their skin marked with burned sigils. No one could read. The alderman's letter had been short and clumsy, written by a hand unused to ink. "Come, Witcher. Death walks in the marsh. Bring silver." As Roach's hooves splashed through a shallow pool, Geralt murmured to himself, "Bring silver, aye, always silver, but they never mention coin." Veldorn came into view through the mist, a cluster of thatched roofs hunched beside a crooked wooden palisade. Smoke curled from chimneys thin and pale, like frightened ghosts trying to flee the rain. Dogs barked at Geralt's approach, and a few faces peered from shuttered windows, the kind of faces that had seen too much and trusted too little. He dismounted before the inn, the Wailing Pike, its sign creaking in the wind. Inside, warmth struck him like a blow. Firelight, stew, and the unmistakable scent of fear. Conversations faltered as the Witcher entered. He hung his cloak, brushed the mud from his boots, and approached the counter. The innkeep, a thick-shouldered man with eyes like wet stones, swallowed hard before speaking. "Evening, Witcher. Didn't expect one of your kind to answer so quick." "Quicker I come," Geralt replied, his voice calm. "The fewer corpses you'll have to bury." The man nodded, fumbling with a cloth. "Aye. Alderman's waiting for you. Says there's been another killing, by the marsh road. Gods preserve us." Geralt's gaze shifted to the corner of the room. A woman sat there alone, her hood low, the faint glimmer of a silver brooch marking her cloak. He caught the faint scent of lilac and gooseberries. No, not that scent, not hers, but another, sharper, threaded with something metallic. Magic. When their eyes met, hers were cold and green, with that peculiar depth that only the gifted possessed. "You're late," she said, rising gracefully. "I've been waiting since dawn." "I wasn't aware the alderman had help," Geralt replied evenly. "He doesn't." She stepped closer, lowering her hood. Her hair was black as raven feathers, braided tightly, her features sharp but weary. "Lyanna of Ban Ard. I'm investigating the same killings. The locals think it's a vampire. They're wrong." Geralt's brows lifted slightly. "Are they?" Lyanna's lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. "You'll see soon enough. Come." The alderman's house. They crossed the muddy square, watched by silent villagers. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low and heavy. The alderman's home stood at the edge of the palisade, a wooden hall with a sagging roof and a torch burning at the door. Inside, the air reeked of herbs, sweat, and fear. Alderman Yorick was a thin man with trembling hands. He greeted Geralt with nervous gratitude and set a pouch of coins on the table. "We'll pay fair," he said quickly, "if you rid us of the thing. 5 dead now, all found the same way. No prints, no tracks, just gone." Then they turn up by the marsh, pale as candle wax, and them black marks burned right into their chests. Geralt examined the marks etched into a scrap of cloth, a sigil drawn over one of the bodies. It was not elven nor dwarven, nor any known glyph of monsterkind. Instead, it reeked of magic, old and foul. He glanced toward Lyanna, who stood near the hearth, watching him. "You recognize it," she said softly. "It wasn't a question." "I've seen its like," Geralt admitted. "Once on the corpse of a revenant. The mage who bound it died screaming when his own spell turned on him." Yorick crossed himself with a trembling hand. "A mage's doing, then?" Geralt didn't answer. Instead, he rose, fastening his cloak. "Show me where the last body was found." The alderman hesitated, looking from the Witcher to the sorceress. "It's dark now. The marsh ain't safe after sunset." Geralt's pale eyes narrowed. "Neither is your village if we wait." They left soon after, lanterns bobbing in the mist. The path wound through the reeds, every step sinking into wet earth. Frogs croaked, unseen things rustled in the dark. Lyanna walked beside him, silent, her hands hidden in her sleeves. "You shouldn't have come alone," Geralt said after a while. "I didn't," she replied, her tone unreadable. "I came with my spells. You came with your sword. Let's see which is stronger tonight." At the edge of the swamp, they found the remains. What was left of a man sprawled beside the water. His face was drawn tight, his eyes black and empty, and across his chest, burned deep into flesh, was the same sigil as before. Geralt crouched, running a gloved hand over the symbol. The skin was scorched from within, as though fire had burned beneath it. "Not the work of fangs," he murmured. "And not fresh." Lyanna knelt opposite him. "The sigil binds the soul. Whoever cast it tried to summon something, or someone, from beyond death." "Necromancy?" Her eyes flickered up to meet his. "Black magic, forbidden for good reason." Geralt rose slowly, hand resting on the hilt of his silver blade. The swamp around them had fallen silent. No frogs, no wind, not even the drip of water. Then came a whisper, faint, inhuman. It slithered across the reeds like smoke. Lyanna stiffened. "It's here." Geralt drew his sword, the moonlight catching on silver. "Then let's not keep it waiting." The water rippled, something moved beneath, and the first scream rose from the village behind them. The scream tore through the mist, raw and distant, carrying the sound of panic through the night air. Geralt turned at once, eyes narrowing. The village was still visible beyond the dark reeds, torchlight flickering like frightened fireflies. "Go!" he barked, sprinting through the mud. Lyanna followed, her boots splashing through the pools, cloak whipping in the wind. The whisper in the air deepened into a moan, low, unnatural, like breath, forced through a dead throat. By the time they reached the first huts, chaos had erupted. Villagers ran in all directions, clutching torches and pitchforks, their faces pale and wild. "It's in the square!" someone cried. "It took Merrick!" Geralt pushed through the crowd, his silver blade glinting faintly in the light of the burning torches. The smell hit him first. Rot, cold earth, and something bitterly metallic. He saw movement ahead, a shadow darting behind a well, too fast to be human. "Stay back!" he shouted. "All of you!" Lyanna raised her hands, murmuring an incantation. under her breath. Lines of blue light shimmered briefly around her fingers like tiny veins of lightning. The creature stepped into the torchlight. It was tall and thin, its flesh gray and stretched tight over its bones. Empty eye sockets stared from a skull-like face, and its mouth hung open in a silent scream. Across its chest, glowing faintly, was the same black sigil, pulsing like a second malevolent heart. The villagers gasped, some falling to their knees in prayer. "Revenant," Geralt said coldly, "not a vampire." Lyanna's voice trembled. "It shouldn't exist. Not anymore." The Revenant lunged, faster than thought. Geralt met it head-on, his sword flashing in a wide arc. Steel rang, sparks flew, and the creature reeled back, hissing, its claws slicing through the air. Geralt moved again, quick and precise, every strike guided by decades of deadly rhythm. But when his blade bit into its flesh, the wound did not bleed. Instead, black smoke poured out, twisting and writhing as though alive. The sigil on its chest flared red, and the creature lashed out, catching Geralt across the shoulder. Pain seared through him, the blow sending him stumbling backward. He rolled, rose, and drew a sign in the air. "Igni!" Flame burst from his hand, washing over the Revenant in a rush of orange light. It screamed then, a shriek that seemed to pierce the sky, and for a moment it burned, the sigil glowing white-hot. But then the fire flickered and died, smothered by the black mist rising from its form. Lyanna stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Tanis in Virta." A surge of blue light struck the Revenant full in the chest, halting at mid-lunge. The creature froze, trembling violently as if held by invisible chains. "Now, Witcher," she shouted, "strike the sigil." Geralt darted forward, his silver blade driving deep into the glowing mark. The Revenant convulsed once, twice, then shattered into a cloud of ash that scattered with the wind. Silence fell. The only sounds were the ragged breathing of the villagers and the soft hiss of the rain beginning again. Geralt stood still, sword lowered, chest heaving. Lyanna knelt by the remnants of the creature, her face pale in the torchlight. "That was no common Revenant," she whispered. "It was bound, controlled, and not by a novice." Geralt sheathed his blade. "Then someone nearby knows the art, someone strong enough to bend death to their will." The alderman approached, his hands trembling. Is it over?" Geralt's eyes met Lyanna's. Neither spoke for a moment. "No," Geralt said finally. "It's only begun." They stayed until dawn, burning what remained of the corpse and sprinkling salt around the ashes. The villagers watched in fearful silence, too afraid to come close. When the first light broke over the horizon, Lyanna turned to Geralt, her voice low. "There's something you should know," she said. "That sigil, it was designed by a mage named Veyron. He was my mentor at Ban Ard. He studied the boundary between life and death." Geralt's brow furrowed. "Was?" "He was executed. The Brotherhood found out about his experiments with necromancy. I thought his works were destroyed, but clearly they weren't. Someone found his notes, or worse, one of his unfinished spells." Geralt rubbed a hand over his stubbled jaw. "So the monster we faced wasn't just summoned," she finished for him. "It was made. Flesh and magic twisted together. A servant of a mind that no longer lives." The Witcher looked out toward the marshes, where the fog lay thick and heavy. "Then that's where we'll find our answer." Lyanna's gaze followed his. "The ruins of the old tower. I know the place. Veyron kept a laboratory there, long before he was taken. If anything remains of his work, it will be hidden beneath those stones." Geralt nodded. We'll go at first light tomorrow." But before dawn, the marsh stirred again. He awoke to the sound of something scraping at the shutters. Soft, slow, deliberate. Roach snorted outside, hooves shifting nervously. Geralt rose quietly, hand going to his sword. Lyanna, already awake, stood by the window, pale light from a flickering candle casting shadows across her face. "It's watching us," she whispered. "Whatever called the Revenant, it knows we're here." Geralt moved to the door, peering into the gray mist. He saw nothing, only the marsh, breathing slowly beneath its veil of fog. Still he could feel it, the weight of a gaze unseen, patient and cold. He closed the door and turned to Lyanna. "Then we ride at once. Whatever waits in that tower doesn't want us reaching it." Lyanna nodded, gathering her satchel of runestones and vials. "Then it's afraid." Geralt's expression remained grim. "No, not afraid. Anticipating." They rode from the village as the sun struggled to rise, its light pale and weak through the fog. Behind them, the villagers watched in silence, clutching charms and muttering prayers. Ahead, the marsh opened like a wound, black water reflecting the sky, the ruined tower barely visible through the reeds. As they approached, Geralt felt it again, the same foul pulse of black magic that had burned in the Revenant's chest, only stronger now, closer. "Stay sharp," he said, drawing his sword. "We're walking into its den." Lyanna's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "And if the den isn't empty?" Geralt's reply was cold and certain. "Then I'll make sure it is before we leave." And together they stepped into the mist, toward the tower that waited like a broken tooth in the mouth of the swamp, where the dead were not yet done whispering. The ruins of the old tower rose from the swamp like a blackened spine, its upper stones jagged against the morning sky. Moss crept along its walls, and half the structure had sunk into the mire, devoured by centuries of rain and rot. The air hung thick and still, heavy with the scent of decay and the faint pulse of old magic. Geralt and Lyanna dismounted near a tangle of dead trees. Roach snorted uneasily, ears flicking back. Even the insects seemed to avoid the place. "This is it," Lyanna said quietly. "Varen's tower, what's left of it." Geralt studied the broken stones. The Witcher's medallion vibrated faintly against his chest, humming with that subtle warning that spoke of enchantments and death. "Still strong," he muttered. "Magic doesn't die easily." They advanced carefully, boots sinking into wet earth. The entrance had half collapsed, the wooden doors rotted away, leaving a dark hollow that breathed cold air from below. Inside, the tower was a grave of shadows. Staircases broken, furniture long turned to dust, and symbols carved deep into the walls. Lyanna traced her fingers over one of the sigils. "Protection wards, old and unstable. If they fail..." "They've already failed," Geralt interrupted, his tone flat. "Something got out." They descended into the lower chambers, where the air grew colder. Stone corridors twisted downward, their walls slick with damp. Lyanna lit a small orb of light with a whispered spell, and it floated ahead, casting pale illumination on the path. The Witcher's senses sharpened. Every sound, every scent. The distant drip of water, the musk of mold, the faint trace of old blood. Something had bled here recently. At last they reached a heavy door, its iron hinges warped with age. Strange symbols were scrawled across it in black ink, still wet. Lyanna stiffened. "That's fresh," she said. "Someone's been here. Someone who knows Varen's language." Geralt ran a gloved hand along the markings. Same sigil, as the revenant's chest, whatever's inside, isn't resting. He pushed the door open slowly. It gave way with a groan, revealing a chamber dimly lit by flickering candles. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with jars of herbs and bones, scraps of parchment and shards of crystal. At the center stood a stone table, an altar more than a workspace, and on it lay a corpse. The body was that of a man, clothed in the remnants of a mage's robe, the flesh sunken but not decayed. His hands were bound across his chest, and burned into his forehead was the same black sigil. Leanna drew in a sharp breath. "Varen," she whispered. "Gods, it's him!" Geralt circled the table, eyes narrowing. The sigil pulsed faintly, as though something beneath the skin still moved. "He's not dead," he said. "Not completely?" Leanna shook her head, her voice trembling. "It's impossible. He was executed 20 years ago. I saw his pyre." "Then whoever raised the Revenant found his remains," Geralt replied grimly, "and used them as a vessel." He reached for a vial from his belt, sprinkling the corpse with salt and muttering an old Witcher incantation. The flesh hissed faintly, the candles flickered. Then, all at once, the corpse's eyes opened. Leanna cried out, stumbling back. The eyes were black pits filled with swirling mist. The mouth moved, but the sound that came forth was not speech. It was a chorus of whispers, many voices layered atop one another, speaking through the dead mage's lips. "Lyanna," the voice murmured, "my pupil, still faithful, still blind." She froze. "No, you're not him." "Not him?" the whispers mocked. "I am all that remains of him, his mind, his memory, his purpose. You feared death, Leanna. You feared the end. I have conquered it." Geralt stepped between them, silver sword drawn. "Conquered?" he said. "You're a puppet held up by rot." The mist poured from the corpse's mouth, coiling upward, taking a form that was neither flesh nor spirit. A shadow with a human face, burning with runes of crimson light. "I remember you, Witcher," it hissed. "The butcher of Blaviken, the slayer of cursed kings. Your blade can cut flesh, but not what lies beyond it." Geralt's medallion trembled violently. "We'll see." He swung, the silver cutting through the shadow with a blinding arc of sparks. The specter screamed, its form shattering like smoke in the wind, but only for a moment. It gathered again, darker, stronger, feeding on the magic that filled the air. Leanna lifted her hands, chanting a binding spell. The runes on the walls flared, trapping the specter in a circle of blue fire. "I can hold it," she shouted, "but not for long." Geralt drew another sign, the shape of Erden, tracing its lines in the air. "Then we finish it before it breaks free." The ghost's voice became a roar. "You cannot end what is eternal." The chamber shook. Cracks split the floor. One of the shelves toppled, scattering bones and glass. Leanna strained, her eyes glowing faintly with magic. Blood trickled from her nose as she held the spell. Geralt moved in, his sword flashing once more. He plunged the blade into the corpse's chest, straight through the sigil. A shockwave burst outward, slamming both of them to the ground. The candles went out. The sound that followed was not a scream, but a sigh, deep, ancient, and filled with sorrow. When the light returned, the specter was gone. Only the withered corpse remained, its sigil now a charred scar. Geralt rose slowly, his shoulder bleeding from a cut he hadn't noticed. Leanna sat beside the altar, trembling. "It's done," she whispered. "He's gone." Geralt shook his head. "No. Look." The black mist still lingered in the corners of the chamber, faint but moving. It was flowing, not dispersing but escaping, seeping through cracks in the wall toward the swamp outside. Lyanna's face went pale. The spell didn't destroy it, it released it. Geralt cursed under his breath. Then it's found another host. They ran from the tower, emerging into the damp daylight just as the fog began to churn. From the mire came a low rumble like thunder beneath the ground. Shapes moved in the mist, figures half seen dragging themselves from the mud. Dozens of them, their eyes empty, their skin etched with faint glowing runes. The dead of the marsh, Lyanna said, horror in her voice. He's claimed them. Geralt unsheathed his blade again, silver gleaming through the fog. Then we cut them down before they spread beyond it. The first corpse lunged, and the Witcher's sword met it with a sharp, metallic hiss. Another followed, then two more. Each one fell, only to rise again, bound by the same black spell. Lyanna stood behind him, summoning fire from her palms, hurling it into the horde. The swamp lit with bursts of orange flame, and the stench of burning flesh filled the air. Still they came, relentless, countless. "Back to the tower," Geralt shouted. "If he wants his grave, we'll give it to him." They retreated through the fog, fighting every step. The air pulsed with dark energy, the earth trembling beneath their feet. Inside the tower once more, Lyanna turned, her eyes fierce with resolve. "There's one way to end it," she said. "I can destroy the source, the binding circle that keeps his magic anchored here. But I'll need time. How much? More than you can buy me." Geralt met her gaze, saw the fear there, but also the determination. "Then you'd better work fast." He turned to face the door as the dead began to claw their way inside, the silver blade gleaming in the dim light. And for the first time that day, Geralt of Rivia smiled. Grimly, without humor. "Come on then," he muttered. "Let's dance." The first of the corpses burst through the doorway with a wet crack of splintered wood, its hands clawing, mouth open in a voiceless snarl. Geralt met it with a swift, practiced strike, his silver sword cleaving cleanly through its chest. The thing fell, black mist hissing from the wound, but even as it sank, three more pressed in behind it. The Witcher's medallion rattled furiously. The air itself seemed alive with curse and corruption. He stepped into the fight with the precision of long habit, sidestep, cut low, pivot, thrust, a dance of death honed by years of monsters and men alike. Behind him, Lyanna's voice rose, steady despite the chaos. She stood before the old altar, arms raised, her hair coming loose from its braid as magic gathered around her like a storm. The runes carved into the stone floor flared to life one by one, glowing white, then blue, then violet. Geralt drove his blade through another revenant's neck and kicked the body free. "How long?" he called over his shoulder. "Until the circle breaks," she shouted back, her voice trembling with strain. "If I stop, it all unravels." That left only him between her and the horde. The dead surged forward again, clawing over the fallen, their bodies steaming in the cold air. They were villagers once, men, women, even children, now emptied of all memory and filled with the residue of the mage's black will. Geralt gritted his teeth. He hated when the line blurred. When monster and man became the same, he slashed left, ducked under a flailing arm, and sent another corpse sprawling with a powerful kick. The tower shook as the undead hurled themselves at the doorway. Each one that fell seemed to make room for another to rise. Lyanna's chant grew louder, words of old speech woven together with a force that made the air hum. The temperature dropped sharply. Frost spread along the walls, and the stones beneath her feet began to crack. Suddenly, one of the corpses slipped past Geralt's guard, its claws raking across his gauntlet. He pivoted, driving the silver blade backward through its torso, but pain flared through his arm, a searing burn that wasn't physical. The mark of the sigil spread briefly beneath his skin, then faded. The connection, he realized grimly, worked both ways. The dead weren't fighting alone. Something, someone, was still guiding them. He forced himself forward, cutting through another wave, muscles aching, breath short. His focus narrowed to blade, motion, survival. He did not think of the odds. Witchers didn't think that way. A sudden roar shook the chamber, a voice that was neither wind nor human throat. The walls bled shadow. From the dark above, the black mist coalesced once more, forming the half-shape of the dead mage, Veyron. "You defy eternity," the shade hissed, "but you cannot destroy me. The living shall feed the dead, and through them I shall rise." "Geralt!" Lyanna cried. "He's drawing power from the swamp. The soul's buried beneath it." "Then I'll cut the cord," the Witcher growled. He raised his hand and cast Yrden, the violet trap circle bursting to life beneath his feet. When the specter descended, its form shuddered and slowed, bound in the sign's radius. Geralt lunged, slashing through the ghostly form again and again. Each strike sent ripples of light through the darkness, but the mage's laughter echoed still, deep, and cold. Lyanna screamed something in elder speech, her voice breaking. The floor's runes flared brighter, forming a burning ring around the altar. The entire tower began to tremble, dust and debris raining from above. Geralt was thrown to the ground as a wave of magic burst outward. The undead froze mid-motion, their bodies stiff as statues. The air filled with a low hum, a vibration that seemed to pierce the skull. Lyanna was at the center of it all, her arms outstretched, the light from her spell searing her skin. "I can sever his bond," she gasped, "but it will take everything." "Stop!" Geralt shouted, forcing himself upright. "You'll burn yourself alive." Her eyes met his, clear green and filled with a strange calm. "Then it will end as it should have 20 years ago." Before he could reach her, she pressed both hands to the altar and spoke one final word. The sound of it was like the crack of the world itself. A column of light surged upward, spearing through the roof of the tower. The black mist screamed, 1,000 voices shrieking at once, and then scattered into nothingness, torn apart by the force of her spell. The corpses collapsed where they stood. The silence that followed was so deep it rang in the ears. Geralt staggered to his feet, coughing through the smoke and dust. The altar was shattered, the floor scorched. Lyanna lay still at its base. Her robes burned, her hair fanned across the stones. He knelt beside her, checking for breath. Faint, but there. "Stubborn woman," he muttered. She stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open. Is it over? For now?" She gave a faint, tired smile. "I told you my magic was stronger." Geralt huffed a laugh that wasn't quite humor. "I'll not argue." He lifted her carefully, setting her against the wall. "Rest? You've done enough." Outside, the fog was thinning. The air, though still damp, felt cleaner. The oppressive presence gone. The dead lay quiet in the swamp, and the tower no longer hummed with the sick pulse of necromancy. Lyanna watched him in silence for a moment, then said softly, You should go. The villagers, they'll not understand. They'll say we brought this upon them. They always do, Geralt said. He cleaned his sword, the silver gleaming faintly in the wan light that filtered through the broken stones. Still, someone will need to tell them it's safe. Will you? He shook his head. You're the mage. They'll trust your word over mine. She gave a faint, pained laugh. Trust? Hardly. But I'll try. He helped her to her feet. They left the tower together, stepping into the pale morning. The swamp was quiet now. No whispers, no movement, only the slow ripple of water. When they reached the edge of the mire, the first villagers appeared, cautious and afraid. They stopped a good distance away, staring at the two figures emerging from the fog. Geralt could hear them whispering already. Witchcraft, sorcery. Death followed them. He ignored it. Lyanna turned to him, her expression unreadable. What will you do now? Collect my pay, he said simply. Then ride. She nodded, though there was something in her eyes. Sadness or perhaps understanding. You'll be remembered here, not kindly perhaps, but remembered. Geralt mounted Roach and adjusted his cloak. That's rarely different anywhere else. He looked back once as he rode away. At the ruins. At the woman standing before them. Small against the fading mist. The swamp stretched behind him, silent and still. Yet in the distance he thought he heard a faint whisper carried on the wind. Not words, but a sound like breath through hollow stone. He did not turn back. The path ahead was long, and the world, as ever, was not short of monsters. The road from Veldorn wound west through bog and field, its edges blurred by fog and the slow creeping return of winter. Geralt rode in silence, the rhythm of Roach's hooves steady against the soft earth. The morning sun struggled through the haze, a pale disk veiled in mist, offering little warmth. He had left the swamp behind, yet its scent, that foul mixture of decay and magic, still clung to his cloak, stubborn as a curse. The Witcher's thoughts were restless. He had seen mages twist life before, had seen the dead rise in cruel mockeries of what they once were. Yet there was something in Veyron's curse that unsettled him more deeply. The lingering echo of the necromancer's voice, the sense that death itself had been watching. By noon he reached the main road where an old wooden bridge crossed a narrow river. He stopped to let Roach drink and to clean the grime from his blade. The silver shone faintly, unmarred, but his medallion still vibrated from time to time, a sign that whatever corruption had taken root in the swamp was not entirely gone. From across the bridge came the sound of hooves. Geralt glanced up, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. A small company of riders approached, 3 men wearing the livery of Temerian soldiers, and at their head a stout sergeant with a scar across his chin. "Halt!" the sergeant barked, raising a hand. "You there, Witcher, is it?" Geralt didn't move. "Depends who's asking." "Sergeant Osgurt, Temerian Patrol. We've had reports of dark sorcery near Veldorn. A woman and a mutant were seen leaving the marsh at dawn. That wouldn't happen to be you. And your companion, would it?" Geralt met his gaze evenly. "I was hired to deal with a curse. It's done." The sergeant frowned. "Done, you say? We passed the village. Half the folk there are gone. Some dead, some fled. The alderman swears you brought the plague upon them." Geralt sighed. "Typical." "Maybe," Osgurt said, "but orders are orders. The crown's no friend to necromancy or those who meddle with it. You'll come with us." Answer some questions in Vengerberg. Geralt's eyes flicked briefly to the men behind him. Young, nervous, their hands twitching near their blades. You'd best be sure of what you're doing, Sergeant. You won't like how it ends if you're wrong. The sergeant shifted uneasily but did not lower his hand. I've heard tales of witchers, he said, but law's the law. Drop your sword. Geralt didn't move. The air grew still. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to wait. Then a sudden gust swept down from the trees, and with it came the faintest whisper. A voice he recognized. Geralt. It was Lyanna's voice. He turned sharply toward the sound, but there was nothing. Only the river, the wind, the rustle of branches. Yet his medallion trembled again, stronger now, resonating with a pulse like a heartbeat. Witcher? Osgurt said, confused. What is it? Geralt's eyes narrowed. Something's following me. Before the soldiers could react, the sky darkened. A shadow moved beneath the surface of the river, a slick ripple that spread outward in a wide circle. Then, with a roar like bursting stone, the water exploded. A massive figure surged upward, a corpse thing, bound in roots and mud, its eyes glowing with the same cursed sigil that had marked the revenant in the swamp. The soldiers shouted, scrambling for their weapons. Back! Geralt roared, drawing his sword. Get off the bridge! The creature struck, its limb, a tangle of bone and sinew, crashing through the wooden planks. One soldier vanished beneath the river's surface before he could scream. The others ran for the far bank. Geralt leapt aside, slashing at the thing's arm. The silver cut deep, sending black ichor spilling into the water. It howled, a sound that chilled the marrow. Geralt felt the force of it in his bones. The sigil on its chest burned crimson, pulsing in time with the vibration of his medallion. He recognized it at once. Veyron's mark. The mage's essence had survived, clinging to something vast and buried beneath the swamp. A corpse from the riverbed, drawn upward by vengeance and black will. Geralt rolled aside as another strike smashed into the bridge, shattering the timbers. He cast Ard with a sharp gesture, the telekinetic wave blasting splinters into the creature's face. It reeled, roaring again, and Geralt lunged, driving his blade into the sigil's center. For an instant, everything went still. Then the sigil flared, and a shock wave threw him backward into the shallows. Pain ripped through his arm as he hit the stones. Witcher? Osgurt shouted from the far bank. What in Melitele's name is that thing? Something that should have stayed dead, Geralt grunted, forcing himself up. The creature thrashed, tearing the remnants of the bridge apart. Geralt circled, waiting for an opening. He reached into his pouch, pulling a vial of crimson liquid, Thunderbolt, and drank. Strength surged through him, his senses sharpening. The monster lunged again, jaws snapping wide, and he moved, a blur of steel and motion. He leapt, landing atop its back, and drove his sword down with both hands. The silver pierced deep into the glowing sigil, and this time the creature convulsed violently. A deafening shriek split the air. The black light burned away, and the corpse collapsed, crumbling into the river with a hiss of steam. Geralt stood motionless for a moment, breathing hard. His medallion still hummed faintly but slower now, fading with each passing second. Osgurt and his remaining man approached, eyes wide. By the gods, the sergeant muttered. We thought you dead. Not yet, Geralt said. He retrieved his sword and sheathed it. That thing was bound to me, to the curse I broke. Seems the mage wasn't content to die quietly. The sergeant swallowed. So, it's done now? Geralt looked at the ruined bridge, the black stains spreading downstream. No, just another reminder that magic always leaves something behind. He mounted Roach again, ignoring the throbbing in his shoulder. You can tell your captain? The sorceress died, saving your realm from worse. And if the villagers want to call it witchcraft, let them. I've no time to argue with ghosts. Osgurt nodded slowly, unsure whether to salute or cross himself. Where will you go? Geralt turned his gaze westward toward the fading horizon. There's always another road, he said simply. He rode on until the patrol vanished behind him, until the swamp's stench gave way to pine and smoke. The sky cleared slowly, revealing a thin band of gold at the edge of the clouds. Yet even as the sun dipped low, the Witcher's mind remained shadowed. Lyanna's voice still haunted him. That final whisper on the wind. Whether memory or magic, he could not tell. But somewhere deep within him, a small, unshakable thought took root, that death had not yet claimed all that was meant to be gone. He pressed onward, and the road swallowed him. One lone rider against the vast gray world, silver blade gleaming faintly at his back. As the echoes of black magic faded into silence behind him, Geralt reached the foothills by dusk, where the swamps gave way to rolling fields washed in mist. A small hamlet sat ahead, tucked beneath the shadows of an old watchtower, its stone walls cracked and ivy-choked. Smoke curled from the chimneys, the smell of burning oak drifting on the wind. The Witcher's cloak was torn, his shoulder bound hastily in linen, but the exhaustion that gripped him was more than physical. He had seen the face of death too often these past days, and the echoes of black magic still gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. He dismounted near the inn, a crooked building with faded paint and a sign that read, "The Crooked Mare." The door creaked as he entered. Inside, the warmth was heavy, filled with the murmur of quiet voices and the thick smell of stew. The few patrons turned to stare, as they always did, their eyes lingering on his swords. A Witcher drew attention wherever he went, and rarely the good kind. Geralt ordered ale and a place to sleep. The innkeeper, a narrow man with the nervous eyes of a fox, nodded quickly, setting a mug before him. "Long road ahead, Witcher?" the man asked, his tone cautious. "Long enough," Geralt replied, taking a slow drink. The ale was sour but wet, and that was good enough. The innkeeper leaned closer. "Words reached even here, you know, about the swamp. Some say a curse rose again. Others say you killed a sorceress." Geralt's jaw tightened slightly. "People say a lot." The man hesitated, then nodded, deciding it best not to pry further. He moved away, and the hum of conversation resumed. Geralt sat alone, staring into the flickering hearth. His mind returned to Lyanna, her final spell, the look in her eyes when she'd said she could sever the curse. He had seen mages die before, but her death lingered like a bruise. She hadn't sought power, only redemption for another's sins. That, perhaps, made it worse. He finished his drink, then made for the stairs, but before he could reach them, a voice stopped him. Geralt of Rivia. He turned. A man stood near the door, tall and lean, cloaked in dark leather. His hair was streaked with gray, his face marked by old scars. A wolf's medallion, identical to Geralt's, hung around his neck. "Lambert," Geralt said, "didn't expect to see you this far west." The other Witcher smirked. "Didn't expect to be here either. But trouble seems to find us, doesn't it?" Geralt motioned to the empty chair beside him. "You look like you've been through your own hell." Lambert sat, signaling the innkeeper for 2 more ales. Haven't we all? Heard rumors from the marshlands? Dead rising magic thick as tar. Figured it sounded like your kind of mess. Geralt grunted. It was? And it's done. For now. Lambert studied him a moment. For now, eh? You never did sound convincing when you said things were finished. The drinks arrived. They sat in silence for a time, the fire crackling softly. Finally, Lambert spoke again. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have. Lambert raised a brow. You're not the superstitious sort. Not superstition, Geralt said, just unfinished business. A mage named Veyron. His curse ran deeper than I thought. It spread through death itself. Lambert gave a low whistle. Necromancy, then. Black magic, Geralt corrected. The kind that leaves a stain on everything it touches. I thought it died with him, but something still stirs. Lambert leaned back, the wood of his chair creaking. You plan to chase it? Geralt didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. Lambert chuckled under his breath. You'll never learn to walk away, will you? Geralt's expression didn't change. It's not about learning. It's about doing what needs to be done. The other Witcher nodded, thoughtful. There's talk in the north, he said after a while. Bodies turning up near Cadwyn. Not fresh ones. Like something's been digging them up and putting them back together. The descriptions sound familiar? Geralt's gaze sharpened. How familiar? Marks on their flesh? Burned sigils? The same kind you're describing. The air between them grew heavy. Geralt drained the last of his ale and stood. Then this isn't over. Of course it isn't. Lambert followed him out into the night where the air was sharp with frost. The sky had cleared and the moon hung pale over the hills. I'll ride with you as far as the border. After that, I've a contract near Ard Karai. Fine, Geralt said, but keep your sword ready. If this trail leads where I think it does, we're riding into something worse than any ghoul nest. They left at dawn, the village fading behind them as the first light crept across the fields. The world was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds seemed wary of singing. For 2 days they rode north, crossing into Cadwyn's wild borderlands, a country of frost, fir trees, and silent valleys where old wars had left their scars. The road wound through an abandoned settlement, roofs caved in, and fields gone to seed. Signs of old battle lingered, rusted armor half buried in the snow, the bones of men and horses alike. Lambert broke the silence at last. You ever wonder why we keep it this? Because no one else will, Geralt said simply. They rode on. By the 3rd day, they reached a narrow gorge where the remains of a bridge hung broken over a frozen stream. The trail veered east toward the ruins of an old stronghold, half hidden among the cliffs. Smoke rose faintly from one of the towers. Lambert frowned. Someone's there. Or something, Geralt murmured. His medallion had begun to vibrate again, faintly but steadily. We'll take a look. They approached on foot, blades drawn. The courtyard was littered with bones, human and animal both, arranged in strange, spiraling patterns. At the center a fire burned, and beside it stood a figure cloaked in red, chanting in a low voice. Geralt stepped closer, and the figure turned. For an instant his breath caught. It was Lyanna, or rather something wearing her face. Her eyes glowed with that same crimson light he had seen in the Revenant's chest. The mark of Veyron burned faintly on her brow. Geralt, she said, her voice both hers and not hers, you freed me, and now I see. He lifted his sword. You're not Lyanna." The thing smiled, a slow, terrible smile. "No, but she showed me the way back." The air shimmered, the sigils around the courtyard flaring to life. The bones began to rise, drawn together by invisible force, forming shapes that were not human. Lambert swore under his breath. "Geralt," he muttered, "you didn't tell me your ghosts could talk." The Witcher's grip tightened on his blade. "They can do more than talk." The thing that wore Lyanna's face raised its hands, and the dead began to move. The stronghold filled with the sound of rattling bones and whispering voices, and once again, the Witcher of Rivia stepped forward to meet them. The dance began anew, silver flashing beneath a blood-red sky, as the curse of black magic refused to die quietly. Snow fell in silent sheets across the ruins, veiling the world in white. The air stung with cold and the stench of sorcery. Geralt moved through the swirling flurry, his silver blade gleaming under the red glow of the sigils that pulsed from the courtyard walls. Lambert was already at his side, his own sword drawn, eyes narrowing as the first of the creatures shambled toward them. They were bone and shadow, fragments of men bound together by unseen strings of black magic. Empty sockets burned with dim red fire, and their jaws clicked in an eerie, rhythmless chatter. Above them, the woman who wore Lyanna's face watched like a priestess overseeing some unholy rite. "Varen's magic," Geralt said grimly. "He's using her body as a conduit." Lambert spat into the snow. "Figures, I told you this wasn't over." The nearest creature lunged, its claws scraping stone. Geralt met it head-on, his blade cleaving through ribs and spine. The corpse fell in two pieces, but the magic held. The bones quivered and reassembled themselves. "Signs!" Geralt barked. Lambert's hand shot out. "Igni!" Flame burst forward, searing through the animated skeletons. Bones blackened, cracked, and turned to ash. But for every one that fell, two more rose. Lyanna, or the thing inside her, raised her arms. "You cannot destroy what death has claimed," the voice said. It was Lyanna's tone, but deeper, layered with something older. "He has returned, Geralt. The master of the circle endures." "Varen's dead," Geralt snarled. The voice only laughed, a sound like the grinding of stones. "Death is a door, not a wall, and you opened it." The sigils along the walls blazed brighter. The air itself thickened, shimmering with black threads that twisted into shapes like serpents of smoke. Lambert cursed. "We can't fight them all." "We're not going to," Geralt replied, eyes locked on the figure above. "We cut off the source." He dashed forward through the storm of rising bones, slicing and shoving his way toward the stairs. The Witcher's reflexes turned the chaos into rhythm. Slash, roll, thrust, parry. Each movement precise. Each blow killing just long enough to make room for another. Lambert covered his flank, fire flaring in arcs. "You always pick the fun jobs." "Complain later," Geralt growled. They reached the base of the steps. Lyanna's possessed form descended slowly, her bare feet leaving no prints in the snow. Around her, the sigils pulsed in unison with her heartbeat. "Do you see now, Witcher?" she said softly, almost kindly. "This world festers, men rot, kings burn their thrones, and the living forget the dead. Varen only wished to mend the order, to let the worthy live again." Geralt's expression was unreadable. "You call this mending?" Her eyes glowed red, her smile fading. "He showed me eternity. You cling to death like a fool clings to pride. You could have joined him. stood beyond life and decay, but you choose to swing that blade again and again as though steel can silence the void. Steel can do plenty, Geralt said coldly and lunged. Their blades met with a sound that cracked the air. She wielded a dagger of pure shadow, each strike quick and vicious. Geralt parried, twisted, struck back. Sparks danced between them. Lambert fought nearby, keeping the dead from closing in, his fire casting wild light through the snow. "Lambert!" Geralt shouted. "Break the circle! Working on it!" Lyanna, or the thing wearing her, pressed harder, her strikes guided by unnatural strength. Geralt countered, his medallion vibrating like a drum. Magic poured off her like heat, bending the air around her. He drew a sign with his free hand, Erden, and the purple glow expanded beneath their feet. The effect slowed her movements, her shadow form wavering. For an instant he saw Lyanna's true face beneath the corruption, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Geralt," she whispered, voice breaking through the demonic undertone. "Kill me." The shock faltered his strike only for a moment, but it was enough. The shadow surged again, reasserting its control. "Fool," the dark voice roared. "She begged for knowledge, and I gave her truth," Lambert shouted from the courtyard. "Circle's weakening. Whatever you're doing, do it faster." Geralt's mind raced. The spell had bound Lyanna's soul to Varen's essence. Destroying her body might free the magic, or unleash it entirely. The possessed mage raised her hands, black fire forming in her palms. "Endings are illusions," she said, "but you, Witcher, will make a fine beginning." The fire burst forth, slamming into the stones. Geralt dove aside, the blast tearing a crater through the stairs. He rose again, his cloak aflame, and hurled a bomb. Dimeridium. The explosion snuffed the magic in an instant. The fire died, and the air cleared, leaving Lyanna staggering, her eyes wide with confusion. He moved in, quick as lightning. The silver blade caught her at the shoulder and swept cleanly through. She gasped, the dagger falling from her grasp. Red light poured from her wound, like blood made of flame. Geralt caught her as she fell. The glow in her eyes faded. "Geralt," she murmured. "Tell them I tried." "I know," he said softly. "Rest now." She smiled faintly. "You still owe me that drink." Then she was gone. The body went limp, and the sigils around them flickered, dying one by one. The courtyard fell silent. The bones collapsed, lifeless again. Lambert approached, panting, sword in hand. "You did it." Geralt looked down at her still form. "No, she did." They burned the body at dawn. The flames rose high, their glow washing over the ruined fortress and the snow-streaked mountains beyond. Neither Witcher spoke. There was nothing to say that hadn't been said 100 times before. When the fire finally died, they mounted their horses. "Where now?" Lambert asked. Geralt's gaze drifted northward, toward the peaks, lost in mist. "Kaer Morhen," he said after a long pause. "Winter's coming. The path can wait until the thaw." Lambert nodded. "Good. I'm tired of dead things that don't stay dead." They rode on in silence, the cold biting through leather and mail. The sun rose weakly behind them, thin and distant, as though even it feared to cast too much light upon the world. As the road wound higher into the mountains, Geralt glanced back once. The ruins were small now, almost hidden by the snow. Yet for a moment he thought he saw movement, a single ember glowing faintly amid the ash. He blinked, and it was gone, Still, his medallion gave one last tremor before falling still, and though he told himself it was only the wind, Geralt of Rivia rode on with the uneasy knowledge that Varen's magic, like all evil born of man, seldom perished completely. It merely waited, buried deep, for the next fool willing to unearth it. Winter deepened as Geralt and Lambert made their way north. Snow swallowed the valleys, and the mountain passes grew treacherous with ice. Days blurred into a cold, gray rhythm. Travel, fire, sleep, travel again. The path was quiet, too quiet, and the silence of the land pressed down upon them like a weight. They spoke little. Witchers rarely did unless there was need. The work demanded patience, and silence often served better than conversation. Yet as they neared the foothills of Cadwin, Lambert broke that silence with a low mutter. "Still thinking about her?" Geralt didn't answer immediately. The snow crunched beneath Roach's hooves. The wind hissed through the pines. "She made her choice," he said finally. "Yeah, well, so do we. Every damn day." Lambert's tone held no judgment, only weariness. "You can't carry every ghost, Geralt. You'll run out of room." Geralt said nothing, but his jaw tightened. By dusk, they reached the edge of an abandoned way station. A few half-collapsed cottages, their roofs buried beneath snow. The remains of a signpost jutted from the drift. Old Nerek's Crossing. No smoke, no movement. They made camp inside the least damaged hut, its hearth blackened from some long-forgotten fire. Geralt lit new flame, the orange glow pushing back the cold. The smell of smoke filled the small space, bringing with it a fragile sense of peace. Lambert took first watch, sitting near the door with his sword across his knees. Geralt cleaned his blades, checked his elixirs, and lay back, listening to the wind outside. It wasn't until sleep began to creep in that he heard it. A faint sound beneath the howl of the storm. A whisper. At first he thought it was the wind slipping through cracks in the wood, but no. The words were distinct, though faint, like speech carried across a great distance. "Geralt." He sat up, eyes narrowing. Lambert looked over from the doorway. "What is it? Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" The whisper came again, softer this time. "You left it unfinished." Geralt's hand found his medallion. It was vibrating again, faint but constant. He stood scanning the room. The corners of the hut were deep in shadow, and the fire flickered as though stirred by breath. "Something's wrong," Geralt said quietly. "Get your gear." Lambert rose at once, his instincts sharpening. "You think—" Before he could finish, the door shuddered. A gust of wind burst through the cracks, scattering snow and ash. The fire went out. Then the whisper became a voice. "Witcher." It was Lyanna's voice, clearer than before, but colder, like sound carried from the bottom of a frozen lake. Geralt drew his sword, the silver catching what little light remained. "Show yourself." The air shimmered. Slowly a shape took form near the doorway. A figure cloaked in gray mist, its edges shifting like smoke. Her face appeared within it, pale and sorrowful, eyes hollow. "Lyanna," he said softly. "You should have burned the tower's heart," she said. "You left the circle unsealed." "He waits still?" "Varen's gone. I saw his magic die." "No." Her voice wavered like the wind. "You destroyed the vessel, not the source. His soul was bound to the earth beneath the swamp, to the relics he forged there. He will rise again through the hands of those who seek what he promised." Lambert stepped closer, sword drawn. "And what did he promise?" "Eternity," she whispered, "the lie every fool believes." Her form flickered, fading with the gust. Geralt reached out, but his hand passed through empty air. Lyanna. The wind fell still. The hut grew quiet again, save for the creak of timber. Lambert cursed softly. Damn specters. Never bring good news, do they? Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. Someone's trying to finish what Veyron started. Lambert's brow furrowed. You think it's tied to the Cadweni mages? Heard whispers. Some of them dabbling in resurrection rites after that Nilfgaardian massacre last winter. Maybe, Geralt said, but if Lyanna's spirit reached this far north, whatever stirs isn't small. They slept little that night. When dawn came, pale and cold, they rode again. The storm had cleared, revealing a sky the color of steel and mountains sharp as knives. By mid-morning they reached the valley pass. A narrow trail cut through frozen rock. Tracks marked the snow ahead. Horse hooves, maybe 6 riders moving north toward the old mining settlements. Geralt dismounted and crouched to examine them. Recent? He muttered. 2 days at most. Lambert knelt beside him. Not soldiers. Look at the spacing. Light loads, careful steps. Traveling with something they want to keep steady. Wagon. Maybe, or a casket. Geralt looked up sharply. You think they're carrying remains? Lambert grimaced. Wouldn't be the first time a bunch of fools dug up something best left buried. They followed the tracks through the valley. The cold deepened, biting through their armor. Midway through the pass, they found the remnants of a camp. Burned out fires, scraps of parchment scattered in the snow. Geralt knelt, lifting one of the pages. Strange sigils inked in black. He recognized them instantly. Veyron's glyphs, he said. Someone's copying his work. Lambert frowned. But why here? Because Cadwen's rich in old blood, Geralt replied. Battlefields, mass graves, plenty of material for someone who wants to bind death again. They pressed on. By dusk, the tracks led them to a ravine, where the wind howled like a living thing. Below, half buried in ice, stood the ruins of an ancient chapel, its spire broken, its door sealed by frost. The Witchers descended carefully, boots crunching on the slope. The air grew colder still, heavy with the taste of magic. At the door, Geralt placed a hand against the wood. His medallion thrummed like a living heart. He's here, he said quietly. They forced the door open. Inside, darkness waited. Thick, absolute. A faint red glow pulsed from the altar, casting long shadows across the walls. At the center stood a group of robed figures, chanting in low voices. A black circle was drawn across the floor, runes carved into the stone, each one burning faintly. Lambert's hand tightened on his hilt. Cultists. Necromancers, Geralt corrected. As one of the figures turned, his hood fell back, revealing a young man, pale, eyes sunken, consumed by feverish zeal. You cannot stop him, he said, voice trembling with devotion. He will return, the dead will rise, and the world will be remade. Geralt stepped forward, sword raised. The world's fine as it is. The young man smiled, bloody teeth glinting. You'll see, Witcher. You'll see when the earth itself remembers him. He thrust his hands into the circle. The runes blazed. The floor cracked. Geralt shouted, Lambert, break the seal. Steel met magic. Fire met frost. The chapel trembled, the dead whispering once more from beneath the stone. And in that terrible instant, Geralt realized Lyanna had been right. He had never sealed the curse, only delayed its waking. Now, beneath the mountains of Caedwen, the dead began to stir again. The chapel shook as though gripped by a giant's hand. The runes burned crimson, bright enough to stain the walls. The robed men chanted faster, their voices rising to a fevered pitch. The floor cracked under their feet, and from the widening fissures came a stench of rot and a low, pulsing sound, like the heartbeat of something buried deep below. Geralt drew his sword. The silver caught the flickering light as he moved toward the altar. Lambert flanked him, flames curling from his fingertips. "You take the lunatics, I'll take the magic," he muttered. "Try not to set the roof on fire," Geralt said, his voice calm but his pulse sharp. The first of the cultists lunged, dagger flashing. Geralt sidestepped, parried, and sent the man sprawling with a strike that shattered bone. Lambert unleashed a burst of igni that tore through two more, the fire devouring their robes before their screams even began. But the chanting did not stop. The leader, the young man with fever-bright eyes, pressed his bleeding palms to the altar, muttering words older than the tongue of men. "Rise," he whispered. "Rise, master of decay. Rise and claim your vessel." A gust of cold wind burst from the fissure, snuffing out the torches. The light of the runes turned black, pulsing like veins of obsidian. Then came a voice, deep and guttural, echoing from beneath the stones. "I hear you," Lambert cursed. "That's not good." Geralt moved closer, his medallion rattling violently. The very air seemed to hum. He slashed through another cultist, but as his blade met flesh, the man's body burst apart in a shower of ash, consumed by the magic he'd called upon. The voice spoke again, stronger now. "I remember you, Witcher." Geralt froze. It was the same tone he'd heard in the swamp, the same chill that had seeped through the walls of Veyron's tower. The corpse mage was speaking through the earth itself. "You thought me gone," the voice rumbled, "but I was only sleeping. And in my dreams, I learned to grow." "Veyron," Geralt said, "you're nothing but dust. Dust can become storm." The altar split in half. From its core burst a column of black fire swirling upward into a mass of shadow. The cult leader screamed as the fire consumed him, his body twisting and breaking until only his bones remained, bound together by tendrils of red light. Lambert shouted over the roar, "Tell me we can kill that." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "We'll find out." The shadow rose, forming a shape, human almost, but vast and hollow. Within it, fragments of faces flickered. Lyanna, the villagers, all those who had died under Veyron's curse, their mouths opened in silent screams as the creature solidified. Lambert cast Yrden, the purple glyph exploding beneath the thing's feet. It staggered but did not fall. Instead, it reached out, its hand made of smoke and bone, and struck the ground. The shock wave hurled both witchers against the wall. Geralt rolled, tasting blood. "Signs aren't enough," he said through his teeth. "We need to collapse the chapel, bring the mountain down." Lambert stared at him, as if he'd lost his mind. "You want to cave in a mountain while we're under it? Unless you got a better idea?" The younger witcher grinned, wild and grim. "Just making sure you're still mad." They split apart, Geralt moving toward the base of the altar, Lambert toward the pillars supporting the roof. The creature turned its hollow gaze upon them, and the runes along its body flared. "Run if you wish," it said, the words vibrating through the stone. "There is no end to me." Geralt ignored it. He threw a bomb, samum, at the nearest column. The explosion tore through the stone, sending shards flying. Lambert followed with Igni, his flames igniting the wooden beams overhead. The ceiling began to groan, dust raining down like ash. The creature roared, a sound that made the air tremble. Shadows stretched from its body, forming spears that shot through the chamber. One grazed Geralt's arm, the touch cold as the grave. He hissed in pain but didn't stop. He reached the altar and slammed his sword into the cracked stone. "If this is your heart," he growled, "then stop it." The silver sank deep. A surge of energy raced up the blade, knocking him to his knees. The black fire wavered, shrinking, screaming. Lambert hurled another blast of flame, striking the fissure at the center of the floor. With a sound like thunder, the ground gave way. The creature screamed again, 1,000 voices crying in agony as the chapel collapsed around it. Stones fell, beams shattered, the air filled with smoke and falling snow. Geralt grabbed Lambert's arm and dragged him toward the entrance. They dove through the doorway just as the ceiling came down. Outside, the night exploded. A shock wave rolled through the valley, flinging both men into the snow. The chapel crumpled inward, swallowed by dust and fire. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the wind began again, howling through the ruins. Lambert groaned, sitting up. "You alive?" "Barely," Geralt muttered, pushing himself to his feet. His ears rang, his vision blurred, but the medallion at his throat was still. Lambert stared at the wreckage. "Think that did it?" Geralt studied the ruins, the smoke rising in dark tendrils. "We bought time? Maybe that's all we can buy." They stood in silence as the snow began to fall again, blanketing the wreckage. The fire hissed and died, leaving only the smell of scorched stone. Lambert finally said, "You ever get tired of cleaning up messes left by dead mages?" "All the time," Geralt said, "but someone has to." They found their horses farther down the pass, spooked but alive. As they rode, the mountains behind them vanished into mist, as though swallowing the memory of what had happened. By dawn, they reached the edge of the forest. Lambert slowed, glancing back one last time. "You think he's really gone?" Geralt didn't answer. The wind carried faint whispers through the pines, too soft to make out, but enough to make the medallion tremble once more. Finally he said, "Nothing that old dies easy." They rode on in silence, the snow falling thicker now, covering their tracks. Far behind them, deep beneath the buried chapel, a single ember flickered amid the ruins. It pulsed once, twice, the faint rhythm of a sleeping heart. Then it went dark. But only for a while. The storm chased them for 3 days. It rolled down from the mountains like an angry god, swallowing the forest in whirling snow and wind that screamed through the pines. The world turned white and gray, the sky and earth indistinguishable. Geralt and Lambert rode through it in grim silence, cloaks drawn tight, faces half frozen. They spoke only when necessary, for words were useless against a storm that devoured sound. When at last the wind broke and the snow thinned, they found themselves in the lowlands of Cadwyn. Endless fields of frost, the silhouettes of villages crouched under blankets of white. The road ahead wound toward a cluster of stone walls and chimneys. Blodwyn, a border town known for its iron and its ale, and little else. By the time they reached its gates, evening had fallen. The guards recognized them for what they were: the twin swords, the eyes, the medallions, and did not argue when Geralt tossed a few coins their way. Inside, the streets were nearly empty, save for a few merchants closing their stalls and a group of children throwing snow at one another near the square. The Witchers rode through without a word, heading for the inn whose sign, a boar pierced with a spear, swung creaking in the cold wind. Inside, warmth and the smell of meat greeted them. The hearth crackled with a hearty fire, and the inn was crowded with miners, traders, and a handful of mercenaries huddled around their cups. As Geralt and Lambert entered, the noise dimmed, as it always did. Eyes turned. Voices fell. Witchers drew silence the way a blade drew blood. They found a table near the corner. The innkeeper, a stout woman with kind eyes, brought ale and stew without needing to be asked. "You'll be wantin' rooms?" she said, eyeing their swords. "For a night," Geralt said. "2, maybe?" "Best make it 1, Lambert muttered. "We won't find peace long enough for 2. She nodded and moved away. For a time they ate in silence. The ale was strong, the stew thick with barley and game. But even the warmth of the fire couldn't drive the unease from their bones. Geralt could still feel the faint vibration in his medallion, the lingering echo of what had happened beneath the chapel. He had thought the curse ended, yet it was like a sickness spreading slowly, unseen. Lambert broke the silence. "You're brooding again?" Geralt's eyes flicked up. "I don't brood." "You do? Every time something crawls out of a grave, you start thinking it's your fault." "Sometimes it is." Lambert snorted. "You give yourself too much credit. The world's been cursed long before you showed up." Geralt didn't reply. His gaze had shifted toward the far end of the room, where a group of men in black coats sat hunched over a map. Their armor bore the crest of Cadwyn's mage hunters, the Order of the White Sun. He'd crossed paths with their kind before, zealots who saw monsters in anything touched by magic. One of them, a sharp-featured captain with a scar down his cheek, noticed his stare. He whispered to his companions, then stood and approached. "You're Witchers," he said, voice low but firm. "Last I checked," Lambert said, not looking up. The captain's eyes moved between them. "You've been seen near the northern valleys. There was a fire, an explosion. Locals speak of sorcery." Geralt's tone remained even. "We dealt with a necromancer. It's finished." "Finished," the captain repeated, as though tasting the word. "We've heard that before, yet the dead still stir. Graves opening in the night. Crows scattering from churchyards." Geralt's medallion trembled. "Where?" The captain frowned. "You sound concerned." "Because I am. Tell me where." The man hesitated, then said, "A day's ride east, the village of Rhiannon's Field. They say a shadow walks at dusk, buries the dead, digs them again." Geralt stood at once. "Then that's where we're going." Lambert groaned. "You don't even let the ale settle, do you? Drink it on the road?" The captain's eyes narrowed. "You're not in charge of this investigation, Witcher. The Order—" Geralt cut him off. "If you want to help, fine. But if you're too slow, people die. Your choice." The soldier hesitated again, then finally nodded. "We ride at dawn." Geralt and Lambert left before sunrise, following the captain and 2 of his men east through the snow. The road was narrow, winding between frost-hardened trees. The closer they came to Rhiannon's Field, the colder the air grew. No birds sang. The only sound was the creak of saddles and the crunch of hooves. When they reached the village, it was nearly dusk. The place was little more than a handful of cottages and a chapel leaning toward ruin. The people they met spoke in whispers, eyes haunted. One old woman pointed toward the graveyard at the hill's edge. "Every night," she said, "it comes, The ground moves, the earth moans. We hear voices, not human ones. The captain crossed himself. We'll stand watch there tonight. They waited as the sun sank, painting the snow red. Geralt stood near the fence, eyes scanning the distance. His medallion pulsed softly, faint, rhythmic, like the beating of a heart under the soil. "Something's close," he murmured. Lambert drew his sword. "How close?" The answer came with a sound, a soft crack followed by a sigh of shifting earth. Then in the graveyard's center, the snow began to stir. A hand broke through the surface, gray, skeletal, clawed. Another followed. Then a shape dragged itself upward, wrapped in decayed cloth, its eyes burning faintly red. One corpse, then 2, then 10. "Damn it," Lambert hissed. "It's the same spell." The captain's men panicked, fumbling for torches. "Back! To the road!" "No," Geralt said, stepping forward. His sword gleamed in the dying light. "If they walk, they follow orders. Something's guiding them." The air turned heavy. A shadow rose among the graves, taller than the rest. Its form was cloaked in rags, but from its face came a whisper. "Witcher." Geralt froze. The voice was Lyanna's. Not twisted, not hollow, but clear, pleading. "Lyanna," he said softly. Lambert glanced at him. "Don't tell me she's back again." The figure stepped forward and the face beneath the hood flickered. Lyanna's features, pale and sorrowful, then gone again, replaced by darkness. "He took my soul," the voice said. "He uses it now, a key to what lies below." "Where?" Geralt demanded. "Beneath Kaer Morhen? Beneath your own walls?" Then the shape dissolved, scattering like smoke on the wind. The corpses fell limp, their red eyes dimming. Lambert swore softly. "Geralt?" "I heard," Geralt said, his voice cold. The captain crossed himself again. "What did it say?" Geralt mounted Roach, gaze fixed north. "That our past just came home." Lambert groaned. "You mean to ride to Kaer Morhen? In this cold?" "In this world, monsters never sleep," Geralt replied. "And if they found their way beneath the keep, then no witcher will." They turned north, leaving the frightened villagers and the silent dead behind. The road stretched on, a white ribbon beneath the stars. Above them, the moon glowed pale and pitiless, and somewhere far ahead, buried beneath the ancient stones of Kaer Morhen, the heart of Veyron's curse began to stir once more. Faint, steady, like a heartbeat echoing through the mountain's bones, night swallowed the world as Geralt and Lambert rode north toward the mountains. The wind howled between the pines, scattering powdery snow that shimmered beneath the pale light of the moons. Their horses moved through the drifts with heavy breaths, steam rising from their flanks like smoke. Neither witcher spoke. Words felt thin against the enormity of what they'd heard. Kaer Morhen, their home, their fortress, the last bastion of the wolf school, was not supposed to hold ghosts. It was a place of silence and memory, where winters passed in solitude and training, and where the old kept watch over what remained of their dying kind. If something stirred beneath its stones, it meant the past had reached farther than any of them imagined. By dawn, the peaks came into view, jagged and white like the teeth of a dead god. The path grew steep, narrow and treacherous, winding between cliffs slick with ice. The familiar towers of Kaer Morhen loomed at last through the mist, dark spires of stone, half buried in snow. Ancient banners, long since rotted away. They reached the outer gate as daylight broke weakly across the mountains. The wooden doors stood half open, the chains frozen with frost. No guards waited. No sound came from within the courtyard. Lambert frowned. Eskel should have met us by now. He never misses the gate. Geralt said nothing, dismounted, and pushed the door open. The hinges creaked loud in the silence. Inside, the courtyard was covered in snow. But something was wrong. The air hung heavy, and the faint scent of burned oil and steel lingered. Tracks, Geralt said quietly. Lambert knelt beside him. Men, not witchers. 2 days old, maybe 3. They followed the prints across the yard toward the main hall. The great doors were ajar. Inside, the fire pits were cold, ashes scattered across the floor. The long tables were overturned, and the walls bore dark streaks, dried blood. Lambert muttered a curse. Looks like someone tried to fight here. Geralt moved deeper, every sense on edge. His medallion began to vibrate faintly, a low hum that grew stronger near the central stair. Something's below. They descended into the keep's lower halls, where the air grew thick and stale. The smell of decay was stronger here, tinged with the metallic bite of magic. The torches on the walls were burned down to stubs, their last embers long dead. They reached the catacombs, the oldest part of Kaer Morhen, carved deep into the mountain itself. Here lay the remains of those who had fallen in the trials, their bones kept in quiet reverence. But the silence was gone. The chamber that should have been still now pulsed with red light. Runes had been carved into the walls, new ones, fresh, drawn in blood. Circles of ash and salt lined the floor, and at the center of it all a great stone sarcophagus lay open. Geralt felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't Eskel's doing. Lambert's eyes darted around the room. Then whose? A voice answered from the shadows. Mine. They turned at once, blades drawn. A figure stepped from the darkness. A man cloaked in black, tall and lean, his face pale beneath a hood. His eyes burned faintly red, the mark of long exposure to forbidden arts. You're a fool to return here, Witcher, he said softly. This place was never yours. It belonged to him long before your order defiled it. Veyron, Geralt said, the name bitter in his mouth. The sorcerer smiled faintly. Not quite. I am his hand, his thought, his echo. His flesh died, but his will lives on. In me, in the stones, in the blood you spilled. Lambert stepped forward, blade raised. Then we'll end the echo too. The man lifted one hand. The air shivered, and the runes on the walls flared to life. The floor cracked, and from the open sarcophagus rose a shape, immense, skeletal, draped in the tatters of a witcher's cloak. Its skull gleamed white in the crimson light, and in its chest burned the black sigil of the curse. Lambert's eyes widened. That's Eskel, Geralt finished, his voice tight. The creature turned its hollow gaze toward them, and a sound escaped its throat. A broken, guttural moan that might once have been a name. Geralt. Lambert staggered back. No, that's not him. The sorcerer's laughter echoed through the hall. He fell defending this place. His body was strong, his will stronger. Veyron claimed what was his. Geralt's hand tightened on his sword. You've turned him into a puppet. Into a vessel, the man corrected. One worthy of my master's return. The undead witcher moved faster than seemed possible. Its sword came up in a blur of steel. Geralt barely deflected the blow, sparks flying. The force of it drove him back several steps. Lambert rushed to flank, his blade striking the creature's side, but the undead did not falter. Eskel! Geralt shouted, parrying again. If there's anything left of you, fight it! For a heartbeat, the thing hesitated. Its grip faltered. Geralt saw something flicker behind those empty eyes. Recognition, pain, the ghost of the man he'd known. Then the sorcerer raised both hands and the moment vanished. The creature roared, swinging again. Lambert ducked beneath the strike, slashing upward. His blade bit deep into the creature's chest, splitting the burning sigil. Black smoke poured out, filling the room with a stench of rot. "Now!" Geralt shouted. He cast Earden, the glyph exploding beneath the monster's feet. The circle glowed violet, trapping the creature mid-step. He lunged forward, driving his sword through its heart. The blade sank deep, the silver glowing white-hot as the curse burned away. The creature let out a sound that was almost a scream, then collapsed, its body disintegrating into ash. The sorcerer staggered back, eyes wide. You can't destroy him. He is eternal." Geralt turned toward him, his face cold as stone. "Everything dies." He threw a bomb, Dimeridium. The explosion shattered the runes, severing the flow of magic. The man screamed as the backlash consumed him, his body dissolving into flame and shadow. When the light faded, only silence remained. Lambert sank to one knee, breathing hard. "Tell me that was the last of him." Geralt stared at the ashes on the floor, the faint glow of dying runes fading into nothing. "It was never about one man," he said quietly. "Veyron's curse doesn't end with his death. It's in the land now, in the dead, maybe even in us." Lambert looked up sharply. "Don't start with that." Geralt sheathed his sword. "Then we burn it all, every trace of his work, every rune, every bone." They spent the next hours scouring the catacombs, pouring oil over the walls, the coffins, the cursed scripts. When they were done, Geralt struck flint and tossed it into the center. Flames leapt high, devouring the dark. They watched until the fire consumed everything, until the stones themselves began to crack from the heat. When at last they emerged into the cold morning air, smoke billowed from the keep's windows, rising toward the mountains like a funeral pyre. Lambert exhaled, the breath steaming before him. "So what now?" Geralt looked at the distant peaks, their crowns gilded by the first light of dawn. "Now we wait," he said. "If the dead sleep, we've done our part. If not..." He mounted Roach, turning towards the path that led down into the valley. "Then we hunt again." The wind carried the smell of ash as they rode. Behind them, Kaer Morhen burned quietly, a lonely flame against the endless snow. The last rite for a fallen brother, and a warning to whatever still lingered beneath the mountain. Days passed beneath a sky of gray steel and wandering clouds. The fires at Kaer Morhen burned for 3 nights before the snow began to smother them, leaving behind only ash and smoke that drifted through the valley like ghosts. Geralt and Lambert rode south, their faces drawn, their silence heavier than armor. There was no triumph in what they'd done. The keep stood, but its heart had been gutted. The road was empty save for the wind. Ravens trailed them from the trees, black shapes against white, waiting for whatever meat fate would cast their way. Geralt rode with his cloak drawn tight, one hand resting on Roach's reins, the other near the hilt of his sword. He had known loss before, comrades taken by monsters, friends claimed by time, but this felt different. The evil they had fought was not gone. It clung to the edges of his thoughts, whispering like frost on glass. Lambert broke the silence at last. "You think we killed him for good this time?" Geralt didn't answer at once. He glanced toward the mountains behind them. The peaks stood black against the sky, their tops crowned with mist. No curse dies easy, he said. Not one built from fear. Lambert snorted. That's what I was afraid you'd say. They rode on. By evening they reached the border of Cadwyn and Redania, a long stretch of forest known as the Lornwood. It was an old place, older than most kingdoms, full of twisted oaks and whispering branches. A fog had settled over it, thick and pale, clinging to the trees like cobwebs. Lovely, Lambert muttered. A cursed forest. Just what we needed. Geralt dismounted. We'll camp here. The horses need rest. They built a small fire beneath the roots of an ancient tree. The flames struggled against the damp air, but held. Lambert set to sharpening his blades, while Geralt sat across from him, staring into the fire. The wood popped and hissed. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, lonely and low. After a while, Lambert spoke again. I keep thinking about Eskel. Geralt said nothing. He was the steady one. Always had something to say when things went wrong, always first to laugh. Lambert's voice was quiet now, almost fragile. Now he's ash on the wind. Geralt nodded. He deserved better. Lambert's gaze lifted to him. So do we. Before Geralt could reply, his medallion trembled, a faint vibration, subtle but unmistakable. He rose instantly, scanning the trees. The fog around them had thickened, swallowing the firelight. Something's here, he said. Lambert stood, blades ready. What now? From the mist came a faint glow, red and pulsing like a heartbeat. The ground beneath their feet shivered. Geralt drew his silver sword. Signs up. They stepped back to back, the fire between them. The light in the fog grew brighter, nearer. Then the mist parted, and a figure emerged. It was not human, tall, shrouded, its body woven from shadows and threads of crimson light. It moved without sound. Where its face should have been, there was only a void, and from that void came a whisper. You cannot burn what is bound to the world. Lambert cursed. Veyron again? No, Geralt said grimly. Something older. The specter raised a hand. The fire shuddered and went out. Darkness swallowed the clearing. Geralt muttered an incantation and drew Yrden. The violet glow burst to life beneath their feet, pushing back the dark. The creature's form wavered. What do you want? Geralt called. Balance, the voice replied. You sever the dead from the living, yet death feeds on both. You have broken the chain, now you will mend it. Geralt frowned. Speak plainly. The voice rippled like wind through leaves. You tore the heart from the mountain. Its magic bleeds still. The dead wander because you left no rest. Lambert spat into the snow. So what? We're supposed to fix death now? Silence, child of steel, the spirit hissed. You wear the wolf's mark, but not its wisdom. Geralt stepped forward. If the curse bleeds, then tell me where. The glow within the fog pulsed brighter. Follow the river north until it dies. There lies the hollow where worlds meet. There lies what you left behind. The figure began to fade, its voice receding with the mist. The dead remember, Witcher. They always remember. Then it was gone. The forest grew still again, save for the soft patter of melting snow. Lambert exhaled. I'm starting to think this curse has a sense of humor. Geralt sheathed his sword. Pack up. We ride at first light. Where to? North, to the hollow. Lambert grunted. We just came from the north. Then we go back, Geralt said, his tone leaving no room for argument. They broke camp as dawn painted the forest in weak light. The fog lingered, reluctant to leave. The path wound beside a narrow stream that glittered like glass. As they rode, the water grew darker until it reflected no light at all, or a river of shadow snaking through the snow. Hours passed, the forest grew stranger, the trees bent and blackened, their roots twisting like claws. Then without warning, the river ended. Its frozen surface split into a yawning chasm, and beyond it lay a valley unlike any other, barren, lifeless, the air heavy with the scent of ash.
Lambert stared. This place isn't natural. Geralt nodded. No, it's cursed. At the valley's center rose a stone monolith, ancient and cracked, covered in runes that glowed faintly red. Around its base lay hundreds of bones. Some animal, some human, some not quite either. Geralt dismounted and approached slowly. His medallion buzzed like a swarm of hornets. This is where it began, he said softly. Lambert joined him, uneasy. What do you mean? Varen's first experiments. Before Banard, before Lyanna, he tried to open the veil between worlds, to reach the other side of death. Lambert swore, and now it's open again. The ground trembled, the runes flared. From the monolith came a sound, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried in stone. Geralt drew his blade. Stay behind me. The air split. A fissure of light tore through the monument, and from it spilled a torrent of shadow. Shapes rose, not men, not beasts, forms made of ash and bone, eyes burning red, their mouths opened in soundless cries. Lambert! Already on it! The younger Witcher cast Igni, flames roaring from his hand. The fire cut through the first wave, but the shadows reformed, coiling and twisting. Geralt swung his sword, each strike scattering sparks and smoke. We can't hold them, Lambert shouted. We don't need to, Geralt replied. We need to seal it. He reached into his pouch, drawing a vial of glowing liquid, moon dust, pure and potent. He hurled it into the fissure. The explosion bathed the valley in silver light. The shadows shrieked and vanished. The monolith cracked again, deeper this time, the sound echoing like thunder, then silence. Lambert lowered his sword. Did it work? Geralt stared at the shattered stone. For now. The light faded. The valley fell still, but as they turned to leave, the faint heartbeat came once more, distant yet persistent, echoing beneath the earth. Lambert heard it too. You know, I really hate that sound. Geralt mounted Roach. Get used to it. The world's full of things that refuse to stay buried. They rode from the valley as snow began to fall again, gentle and silent, covering the bones and the broken stone. Behind them, deep beneath the frozen ground, something ancient waited. Not awake, not asleep, but dreaming still. The ride from the cursed valley lasted through 2 nights and into the 3rd morning. The sun remained a pale smear behind the clouds, weak and cold, offering no warmth to the world below. Geralt and Lambert said little as they followed the trail southward again, their cloaks heavy with frost, their horses exhausted. The valley's silence had followed them, that same oppressive quiet, as if the land itself held its breath. By the 2nd evening they reached the border of Temeria, where the woods thinned into frozen moorland. A thin column of smoke rose from a village in the distance, and the faint glimmer of lanterns flickered among the trees. Lambert sighed, pulling his cloak tighter. Civilization, or something pretending to be it. Geralt grunted in reply. He was too tired to mock the younger Witcher's tone, too burdened by the memory of the monolith and the heartbeat that still echoed faintly in his mind.
Even now his medallion quivered from time to time, as though sensing something beneath the surface of the world that refused to rest. When they reached the outskirts of the village, a small hamlet called Holmfirth, the smell of smoke and blood hit them at once. The snow near the path was stained dark. Crows circled above, their cries sharp and hungry. "Something's wrong," Geralt said quietly. Lambert dismounted, scanning the trees. Could have guessed that. They advanced carefully, swords drawn. The houses were half burned, their roofs caved in, doors torn from hinges. Bodies lay scattered through the snow, men, women, a few soldiers. In the blue and white of Temeria, most bore no wounds that bled. Instead, their faces were gray, drained, the flesh shrunken, as though dried from within. Lambert crouched beside one, grimacing. No blood, like the ones back in Veldorn. Geralt knelt, tracing a finger near the corpse's throat. A faint mark burned into the skin. A familiar black sigil, almost faded. The same magic, but this one's weaker. The curse is bleeding out into the world. Lambert frowned. "You mean it's spreading?" "I mean it's searching," Geralt said, "for something or someone to anchor to." The sound came suddenly, a low, guttural growl that rolled through the smoke like thunder. Both witchers turned at once. From behind the burned chapel, a shape emerged, tall, twisted, its body wrapped in torn rags and sinew. Its eyes glowed faint red, its hands ending in black claws. Lambert muttered a curse. And here I thought the day was going too well. Geralt stepped forward, silver blade gleaming. "Keep your distance. This one's feeding off what's left of the curse." The creature lunged, faster than it had any right to. Geralt sidestepped, parrying with a ringing clash of steel. Lambert moved in from behind, slashing across its back. Black mist poured from the wound, but the creature didn't fall. Instead, it turned, mouth opening in a soundless scream that made the air vibrate. The witchers fell back, blades ready. "You've got a plan?" Lambert asked between breaths. "Kill it," Geralt said. "Brilliant." The monster attacked again, claws striking with the force of hammers. Geralt countered with Ard, the blast of air throwing the beast back into a crumbling wall. Lambert hurled a bomb, Dragon's Dream, and a heartbeat later the air ignited. The explosion tore through the square, sending snow and ash into the air. When the smoke cleared, the creature was still moving, though barely. It crawled forward, leaving streaks of black across the snow. Geralt approached slowly, sword raised. "Who sent you?" he asked. The thing lifted its head. Beneath the ruin of its face, two words slipped out, weak and rasping. "The Hollow wakes." Then it fell still. Lambert kicked at the corpse. "I'm really starting to hate prophetic corpses." Geralt cleaned his blade, eyes narrowing. "It's not prophecy, it's warning." They searched the village through the night, but found no survivors. Every house, every barn, every field bore the same mark of rot. The curse had touched them all. When dawn came, pale and cold, Geralt stood at the edge of the river, staring at the ice. Beneath its surface, the current moved sluggishly, black with silt. Lambert joined him, rubbing his gloved hands together. "So what now? We chase another ghost? Hunt another mage who's already bones?" Geralt's voice was quiet. "We hunt the source, the Hollow. The one from the valley?" He nodded. "If the monolith was the gate, then something passed through it. Something still moving. It's not Varen, not anymore. It's what he woke." Lambert groaned. "And here I was, hoping for a simple drowner's nest." They left Holmfirth before noon. The wind howled across the moors as they rode, the landscape empty and vast. The further they went, the darker the sky grew, until even daylight seemed reluctant to linger. By nightfall they reached a ridge, overlooking a desolate plain. At its center lay a black pit, wide and deep, ringed by frost-bitten stones. Geralt dismounted. The air here felt wrong, thin, sharp, filled with a vibration that made his skin crawl. His medallion thrummed like a drumbeat. "The hollow?" he said. Lambert eyed the pit warily. "It looks like the earth tried to swallow itself." Geralt stepped closer, crouching by the edge. Faint symbols were carved into the stones, the same sigils that had haunted every step of their journey. "This is where it ends," he said. "Or starts again," Lambert muttered. The ground trembled. A gust of wind rose from the pit, carrying with it a whisper that froze their blood. "Witcher." The voice was neither male nor female, but vast, layered, and ancient. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You think you've slain what you don't understand," it said. "But you are built from the same clay. You kill the cursed, yet feed upon their blood. You end what you become." Lambert's knuckles whitened on his sword. What in all the hells is it talking about? Geralt's eyes narrowed. A spirit of death, older than the curse, older than men. The voice laughed, a sound like bones grinding together. "Death is patient, Witcher. You will serve it in time." The wind rose into a shriek, pulling at their cloaks. The pit glowed red, light seeping from its depths. Geralt threw a dimeridium bomb. The explosion roared, and for an instant the glow dimmed. The wind faltered. He turned to Lambert. "Now." Together they cast Írden, their signs overlapping, forming a barrier of violet light that shimmered above the hollow. The ground cracked, the air split with a sound like thunder. The light from below pulsed once, then imploded, collapsing inward, devouring itself. Silence followed. When the wind finally stilled, only the snow moved, drifting slowly into the pit to fill it once more. Lambert lowered his hand. "Is it done?" Geralt looked into the hollow where nothing remained but ice and shadow. "For now." He mounted Roach, voice low. "Curses end, Lambert, but they always leave roots." As they rode away, the first flakes of a new snowfall began to fall, soft and endless. Behind them, beneath the frozen earth, something stirred. Not with anger, not with life, but with memory. And far above, in the endless gray sky, the ravens circled once more, crying their harsh, eternal song over the land that never truly